Hey class, Prof JC here. Today we're going to talk about the law of process. Last week we talked about the law of the lid. Today we're going to talk about what's called the law of process. It's from this great book here called the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. This is one of the first leadership books that I found many years ago when I started diving into leadership, and it's what I would call kind of low-hanging fruit, and I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is this is one of the foundational books that everyone should read when it comes to leadership. It's one of the first books. John Maxwell has a good way of kind of taking complex issues and complex topics and making them very simple. And what he talks about in this book, I think if this is the only book a person reads about leadership, they're going to get it down, right? They might have to reread it, and they might miss a few things, but they're going to get a lot down because he really hits on 21 things. And so today, what he's talking about in his chapter called the Law of Process, chapter 3, he's talking about this idea of compounding and process, and consistency is really what he's talking about. He doesn't call it the law of consistency, he calls it the law of process, but really if we bring it down to it, he talks about what it means to be consistent. So let me read a little bit for you, and then we'll get to our question today. I want to talk about the law of processes. I'm going to end with the story that he tells in this book, and then we'll end up with our questions today. Becoming a leader is a lot like investing successfully in the stock market. If your hope is to make a fortune in a day, you're not going to be successful, okay? There are no successful day traders in leadership development, it's the program we're in, is leadership. What matters most is what you do day by day over the long haul. And then he says, my friend Tag Short maintains the secret of our success is found in our daily agenda. Look, this is so true. And some of you need to hear this today. Maybe you're in a situation where life isn't going exactly kind of the way that you want it to. Maybe there's some frustrations happening. Maybe you're not getting the job done that you want to get done. Things aren't happening as quick as you want, or they're not happening as smooth as you want, or you get going and then you make a mistake somewhere. Everything is found. I'm a systems thinker, okay? Everything is found in the system. And so if things aren't happening the way you want, either for yourself or for your leadership, it all comes back to your system. Everything comes back to your system. Everything comes back to your daily agenda. Okay. If you continually invest in your leadership development, letting your assets compound, the inevitable result is growth over time. What can you see when you look at a person's daily agenda? Their priorities, their passion, their abilities, relationships, attitude, personal discipline, vision, and influence. All of that you can see when you look at a person's calendar. I've got this black book that I keep with me 24/7. I don't let this go anywhere. This black book guides my life. Everything about my life is in that black book. It's my daily agenda. And ever since I started to do that, my life has begun to take off because it really is the secret. And if things aren't going well, it's found in that daily agenda, something I'm not doing as well. Okay, so he talks about that. That's kind of that idea of process. He goes on to say, although it's true that some people are born with natural gifts, with greater natural gifts than others, the ability to lead is really a collection of skills, nearly all of which can be learned and improved. But that process doesn't happen overnight. Leadership is complicated. It has many facets, and some of those facets are respect, experience, emotional strength, people skills, discipline, vision, momentum, timing. The list goes on. As you can see, many factors that come into play in leadership are intangible. That's why leaders require so much seasoning to bring effective. Okay, so much seasoning to be effective, not to bring effective, but to be effective. And then here's what he has to say, John Maxwell. He says, that's why I felt that only after reaching age 50 was I truly beginning to understand the many aspects of leadership with clarity. There's a lot of truth to that. This year, actually, here in just a few weeks, I turned 45, and it's incredible. The older you get, you start rationalizing that, that's not very old, right? 45 is young, right? I'm now at the age where I'm starting to say, when I hear somebody say 65, I'm like, oh, 65 is young. And I actually believe that. I believe 65 is young. I hear somebody say 73. I say 73, that's really young, right? So every year that bumps up. Pretty soon I'll be saying, oh, he's 95. He's pretty young still. But there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. I have found in my own life that I'm just now starting to understand what leadership's about. I've been studying this since 2011, like really studying it since 2011. So that was what, 13 years ago or something like that. And I feel like I'm just now starting to grasp. And so I'm very excited about the next 5 years. If I'm like John Maxwell, be able to get to the age 50 and say, okay, now I think I've got a deeper understanding about what this in. But that's what he's talking about. It's the law of process. Everything takes time. He goes on to say here on page 26, the problem is that most people overestimate the importance of events and underestimate the power of process. We want quick fixes. We want compounding effect. Um, uh, we want compounding effect, right? Something that can happen in 50 years, but we want it in 50 minutes. Right. So that's the problem is we, especially today, again, today I had a great training with a company called Infomark, and we talked about, it was about generations. And one of the things they talked about with the younger generations coming up, one of the things that they wrestle the most with is this idea that we're talking about here. They kind of want things right now. And I don't think it's necessarily a generational thing. I think every young person feels that. I was the same way when I was 19, 20. I wanted it all right now. I wanted quick fixes. I wanted to be promoted within 6 weeks, to CEO of the company. I joined the military because I read a book on Colin Powell, and I thought that I could be a U.S. general, U.S. Army general. And, I didn't know all these steps you had to take and then how many years you'd have to put into it. I thought, well, if I join and I'm really good, watch me. By the age 30, I'll be a U.S. Army general. It doesn't happen like that, right? It takes decades to get to these kind of things. That's the law of process. There's something else that I want to, say is, says what Rick Warren, who's a pastor, he says this: most people, um, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year. Most people, make sure I have this correct. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Most people underestimate what they can do in 1 year or they, excuse me, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Again, it comes back to the law of process. Am I willing to do it? He talks about the phases of the law of process. And phase one is I don't know what I don't know. Phase two is I know that I need to know. Phase three is I know what I don't know. And then phase four is I know and grow, and it starts to show. Phase five is I simply go because of what I know. I simply go because of what I know. And then he says this: when you're in phase four, you can be pretty effective as a leader, but you have to think about every move you make. However, when you reach phase five, that's the ultimate phase in this law of process. Your ability to lead becomes almost automatic. You develop great instincts, and that's when the payoff is incredible. The only way to get there is through the law of process and to pay the price. So again, those 5 phases we just talked about, every single one of us have to get through those 5 phases in order to get there. Okay. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. I'm going to see if there's anything else. I want to read just this last couple of paragraphs here because I think it helps us really understand the law of process. And here's what he has to say: Roosevelt didn't become a leader. He talks about Teddy Roosevelt, who was a former president of the United States. Teddy Roosevelt didn't become a leader overnight. His road to the presidency was one of slow, continual growth. As he served in various positions ranging from New York City Police Commissioner to the President of the United States, he kept learning and growing. He improved himself, and in time, he became a strong leader. And in time, that's the key right there, long-term thinking, in time. There was further evidence that he lived by the law of process. Roosevelt's list of accomplishments is remarkable. Under his leadership, the U.S. emerged as a world power. He helped the country develop a first-class navy. He saw that the Panama Canal was built. He negotiated peace between Russia and Japan, winning a Nobel Peace Prize in the process. And when people questioned TR's leadership, since he had first become president when McKinley was assassinated, he campaigned and was reelected by the largest majority of any president up to his time. Ever the man of action, when Roosevelt completed his second term as president in 1909, he immediately traveled to Africa, where he led a scientific expedition sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution. A few years later, in 1913, he co-led a group to explore the uncharted river of doubt in Brazil. It was a learning adventure he said he could not pass up. It was my last chance to be a boy, he later admitted. He was 55 years old when that happened. On January 6, 1919, when he was 61 years of age, at his home in New York, Theodore Roosevelt died in his sleep. When Vice President Marshall said death had to take him sleeping, for if Roosevelt had been awake, there would have been a fight. I love that. That's how I want to go as well. Yeah, you got to take me while I'm sleeping. You got to take me while I'm sleeping, because if you try to get me in the way, I always tell people that when it's my time to go, I want to be standing at some lectern, some podium teaching somewhere, and my chin's just going to hit that ground. I'm going to be passed out and gone. That's how I want to be taken out. But now watch this. Here's the key. Okay. And we're finishing up right here. When they removed him from his bed, they found a book under his pillow. Up to the very last, Theodore Roosevelt was still striving to learn and improve himself. He was still practicing the law of process. That gives me chills right there to read that. Up to his dying breath, to his last few hours, he still had a book underneath his pillow, still trying to learn. Man, that just gives me chills. That's what you want to be. That's what I want to be, continuing to learn. If you want to be a leader, John Maxwell says, the good news is that you can do it. Everyone has the potential, but it isn't accomplished overnight. It requires perseverance, and you absolutely cannot ignore the law of process. Leadership doesn't develop in a day. It takes a lifetime. And I actually wrote here, you can actually see this. I wrote here, key word right there is daily routine. Keyword is daily routine. So here's the question I want to ask you, and I'm going to let you go for the day. I just mentioned what John Maxwell says, the law of the process, the 5 steps in the law of process. I breezed through all of them, and they're all in the book. If you got the book, you can go find it in the book. I think we're in chapter 3, but I want you to go back and I want you to write down what are those 5 steps, or those five steps in the law of process. I guess that's what he's calling them right here. Or phases. Okay, so he calls them phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. I want you to go back and list those out. And then that's the first thing. And number 2, I want you to list, be honest about it. What phase do you think that you're in? Okay, I want you to be honest about that. So list what phase you think you're in. And then here's the final thing. Why is the daily agenda so important to the leader that you're going to become? Why is a daily agenda so important to the leader that you're going to become? Hey, thanks so much for listening, everybody. I look forward to reading your responses, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.